Brussels Bytes, a podcast about technology, digital society, and European policy. Brought to you by the Martin Centre with Dimitar Lilkov.
Hi friends, and welcome back to Brussels Bytes. Summer is approaching and the EU capital is buzzing with activity and anxiety as institutions are advancing with their work on many legislative files. And talking about buzz, AI and its future regulation has been one of the topics that has galvanized the media and the general public as well. I promise that this podcast episode is not another conversation about ChatGPT and our struggle to keep our jobs in the future. Today we'll be talking about something much more tangible and hopefully much more impactful. What is the role of AI in healthcare? What is at stake when we talk about innovation in this extremely important sector? And how should policymakers address AI regulation in order to guarantee societal interests? We are recording this episode in early July as the EU institutions are preparing their final work for the upcoming trialogues on the AI Act. And joining us today is a small task force of experts who give us great insights from different angles and hopefully some inspiration on topic as well. Joining us live from Edinburgh, Scotland is Gordon Johnston, who is a Senior Manager for Digital Health and Innovation at Johnston. Also joining us today is Sanziana Negreanu, J&J Associate Director for Regulatory Policy in the EU, focusing on future digital and AI legislation. A pharmacist by trade, Sanziana is currently based in Brussels. And last but not least is Angel Martin, who leads the advocacy on digital policies for J&J, including the European Health Data Space and the AI Act. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in this important conversation. And I want to kick off with Gordon. Gordon, can you please lead us through the conversation and kick us off? What should we know when we talk about AI in healthcare? What's the promise? What's the potential in this sector? And why should we be excited about developments in the future?
Great question, Dimitar, and thanks again for the invitation. If I can promise the audience, I'll try and keep, it's a simple question, so I'll try and keep the heavy technical stuff out of my answer as much as possible. So there are many definitions of AI, though in practice, we're talking about the combination of the power of data science and large quantities of health data together with innovations in computing and software. Before considering AI in healthcare, it may help the audience to just think about how AI assistants are already an integral part of our daily lives. Such as the fitness watch on my wrist that I couldn't live without. Everyone's personalized social media. The movie and music recommendations that we all live by. The in-car navigation that comes with, every car that we buy today. Booking at this time of year, booking travel and holidays. If you have teenage kids, online gaming with all kinds of realistic simulations, taking a picture of a bird or a flower when you're out walking, and then you can go into something like Google Lens and find out what that bird or flower is, within seconds, and so on and so forth. So if you kind of take the same underlying technologies, and that's really important, the same underlying technologies behind all of those things that I've just mentioned that we're all used to, and apply them to healthcare, the possibilities become very, very exciting. You can think about enhancing the accuracy of patient diagnosis and prognosis. We can accelerate drug discovery and device design. We can optimize the planning and management of clinical trials. We can advance personalized medicine, which is a really exciting area. There's surgical planning using virtual reality, augmented reality, and simulation. There's robotic surgery that's with us today, and the transformation in patient experience, the transformation in healthcare provider experience, that's really exciting. And some of these solutions are already with us in some form in healthcare.
Maybe you can give us some specific examples about future developments and things where artificial intelligence can actually, make an impact.
Sure, that's another great question. To give the audience a clearer sense of those exciting possibilities, maybe I can share 3 different examples from publicly available information. Now, there's the early detection of cognitive impairment. which I think is, a huge area. And if, like myself, your family's been affected in some way by some form of dementia, you can know that there are novel digital health solutions that are being developed that combine the latest advances in AI and neuroscience and take data from standard cognitive tests. So these are cognitive tests that have been developing for some time now. And they take the metrics from these tests, and then they use machine learning to extensively analyze for small changes in patient brain health. And that's a huge area, massive area. We also have AI in drug discovery. Globally, and I'm talking globally, I'm talking right across, industry at large, and delivery of healthcare at large. Around 10% of drugs in the research and development process are eventually brought to market. And, it benefits everybody if we improve those numbers. Every stakeholder benefits if we improve those numbers. And in terms of R&D, it's essential to quickly identify which compounds don't work as much as it is important to discover new therapies. Now, if I can use the example of AlphaFold, and I'm kind of hoping that word is in some way familiar with your audience, but even if it isn't, it's a partnership between Google DeepMind, which I'm sure a lot of folks do know, and the EU Bioinformatics Institute. Now, I'm relying on most folks having, a distant memory of their chemistry classes at school, but basically, it's all about proteins. And we develop proteins through amino acids, and without getting too technical, it's all about how things fold together. And that's the simplest way of explaining the mechanism behind amino acids and proteins. And basically, when that folding stops, that determines the kind of final shape, if you will. That determines what the protein does. And if I can talk about that in real terms, if you take something like hemoglobin, which is the protein in our blood, your blood, my blood, which carries oxygen all around our body, that contains 600 amino acids, which, so you have a lot of folding going on. Now, AlphaFold uses machine learning techniques to extensively study existing protein structures. And then that way it can predict, new protein structures, with new amino acid combinations, so on and so forth. Now, currently, and this is where that partnership really comes into play, AlphaFold, the database, provides open access to over 200 million protein structure predictions, which accelerate research for everybody who wants to access it. And that's really exciting in drug discovery. And finally, something that I can leave everybody with from an individual point of view, you have AI in patient-centered medicine. This is an AI focus on the individual. You consider cases of people who are in the kind of later stages of some, possibly terminal disease, but very, very serious disease. Is it possible to find safer techniques to test different therapies on a specific person that can at least extend their life? It maybe can't cure the disease, it maybe can't cure the condition, but it can give them some extended quality of life. One such technique uses machine learning methods alongside extracting tissue from the patient, dividing that tissue into samples that contain both diseased and normal cells, and then exposing those, however many samples to lots of combinations of different therapies. And then we use computer vision with that machine learning to kind of look for small changes at the microscopic level in those tissue samples to those therapies. And basically what you're doing with AI is you're really just replicating in a much, much shorter space of time with much more accuracy what doctors do today, which is, just trying out different things over an extended period of time. And it's not just time that we benefit from. We're also doing this kind of therapy without months of chemotherapy, months of, that very, very tough regime that has an adverse effect as much as it has a therapeutic effect. And hopefully those examples are what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically, we're navigating new ground here, and also the fact that you can experiment and you can address these problems for an individual, the individualized aspect of all of these potential solutions is just mind-boggling. But Gordon, I want to stay with you on the topic, because you mentioned the word data and sampling numerous times throughout your intro. And data science has been a topic we've already discussed in previous episodes of this podcast. But I want to again highlight the importance of data. And Gordon, what are the biggest challenges when we talk about data science in healthcare? Because I guess this is one of the trickiest components, no?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and it's a multi-stakeholder conversation, and hopefully, and the answer I give you, everybody gets a sense of that. And I want to stay grounded in the previous question as well, and hopefully I'm able to do that. It's really about access. It's a question of access, and it's access to high quality health data. And I used the word, massive data sets in the previous answer. It's high quality health data at scale. That's the challenge. And again, it's not just the challenge for industry and research and development. It's a multi-stakeholder challenge, because everybody wants to get, that benefit from high quality health data. What I mean by high quality, it's data that's sufficiently representative of some patient population that's, specific to the disease or specific to the health condition, in some fair and unbiased condition. And, that we're not going to go into the details of that today, but hopefully that's understandable to the audience. And this can also mean sufficiently representing the variation in clinical practice, as well as getting data from patients. And by that, I mean, you want to be able to collect from multiple entities. You want to be able to collect from your different hospitals, different regions, across Europe. And when we talk about health data, it's very, very important for me to get across that we're talking about secondary use of healthcare for healthcare research and innovation. So it's not, we're not talking about primary health records here. It's aggregated data. It's about populations. It's about finding patterns. It's about looking for things, in data using, AI and machine learning that we otherwise wouldn't detect, using our normal, human abilities. And again, it's secondary data. It meets, it's got to meet the requirements of the GDPR. It's got to protect fundamental rights, so on and so forth. So we're not getting away from the protections and the controls that we have today. It's just getting, a more mature access space, for sharing data, very correctly and very successfully. Now, the reality is that data sharing for secondary use in healthcare research and innovation isn't a mature space, and it's not a mature space for very reasonable historical reasons. Some are societal reasons, some are technical, and obviously some are regulatory. And bearing in mind that we're having this conversation today while the European Health Data Space Regulation is very much a current conversation, and the intent behind that regulation, unleashing the full potential of health data, that is the question. And from an industry perspective, obviously that's very welcome, and many of my colleagues like myself are participating in various industry groups to provide effective feedback on that text, to the Parliament. Because enabling and encouraging access to high quality health data for secondary use is beneficial to everyone. And it's essential for the future of innovative healthcare. Go back to those examples I just gave you. Those don't happen successfully, or they don't happen as quickly as we'd like them to, unless we can, continue to drive that, improving data access. And again, it's about ensuring high quality standards of quality, but also ensuring high standards of safety of medical devices and future innovative therapies. And all stakeholders, and again, I go back to that point, all stakeholders need the rules for data access and data sharing to be harmonized and applied, to all healthcare actors equally across Europe. And again, really, really important to, emphasize the collective here. And, it's going back to the GDPR, it's going to be a very comprehensive regulation in the European health data space. It has to be clear and workable, the interplay with the GDPR. Everybody has to have a clear understanding of the rights and obligations, all parties in the system that arises from that regulation. Data holders, controllers, processes, and obviously patients have to have confidence.
Yeah. Before we jump into talking about regulation and all the nitty gritty, Gordon, I want to stay with you just for a minute longer and tap into your technical expertise and vast experience. Right now, there's a lot of talk about generative AI and foundational models. Maybe you can walk us through how is this relevant when you talk about healthcare, especially when you talk about large learning models.
Absolutely. This is foundation models. This is the field of generative AI. You know, you can't have looked at your phone or watched TV or heard a conversation without hearing the words ChatGPT or, you know, Midjourney or, you know, OpenAI or so on and so forth. So again, this is maybe the question where I have to challenge myself on the technical as much as possible. But unlike models that we've got used to that are trained on very specific data for very clear intended uses, and we typically call that narrow AI. Foundation models are much larger algorithms, and these are, you know, gigantic algorithms trained on, you know, I talked about massive amounts of data earlier in one of my answers, but this is like massive amounts of data times 1,000. And what we're trying to do is to learn global patterns right across the board of language, right across the board of images, right across the board of sound, so that these algorithms, these models can be applied very successfully to a wide range of tasks across different domains. You know, the scale of the training, the massive amounts of data involved in developing foundation models means that the training requires large amount of computing resources and energy usage. And, you know, these are some of the watch outs. And it also means that only big tech, because of the, you know, the finance involved in getting that computing resource and using that amount of energy, it means only big tech companies and major AI labs can really play a, you know, major role in foundation models. We view the rapid emergence in the context of the Developing AI Act, and you can think about it that way. You know, this is how fast it's moved. When the Draft Act first came out in April 2021, there was literally no mention of generative AI and foundation models, nothing at all. Now, 2 years later, there's a specific article on foundation models and multiple mentions through the text of the Act. So that gives you, you know, an idea of the rate of advance. Many of the major providers have been calling out publicly to be regulated, you know, albeit with several caveats, as you might expect. And to be fair to those developers, some are even starting to develop outlines for what the regulations themselves might look like. And we need them to do that because they're the only ones who fundamentally understand what's going on. However, you know, alongside that, a lot of the development in generative AI and foundation models has become more secretive. You know, they would argue for a lot of commercial reasons. But, you know, on the other side of that, going forward, to be able to keep that, you know, build that trust, build that, you know, patient buy-in, we're going to have to overcome the general lack of transparency that we have with big developers in areas such as the data that they use for training, the architectures that they're building, the techniques that they're using for training, the results they get from, you know, external parties checking what they're doing for vulnerabilities and risks. You know, and again, the computing resources they use, you know, ideally need to, you know, start coming down, and the energy they use, you know, climate change, that absolutely is an area of great focus. They're still in their early stages of development, foundation models. It's not clear, you know, we're far from knowing what their full potential is. And I'm talking about this from our perspective as industry. You know, we're, you know, the healthcare industry isn't developing these models. We're thinking about using them, but we're not the developers. So, you know, we're looking at them and looking at the benefits and the risks of these huge advances in AI, you know, with the same privacy, security, and technical concerns that, you know, a lot of people listening into this podcast will have. But we do believe they could be transformational in solving some of our biggest healthcare problems. There's huge potential due to their capability. We can certainly expect more advances in the space before we can expect any substantial pause in their development. And, you know, some people in the audience may be aware of, you know, some really, you know, famous people asking for that pause. However, you know, the sheer scale of foundation models, the current lack of transparency from many of the providers, means that as users, we have to be careful. We have to commit to extensive testing, and we have to be, you know, very, very steady in our adoption of these solutions at any kind of scale. And hopefully I've given a, you know, a general answer without getting too technical.
Thank you. Thanks for this, Gordon. And here I wanna bring Sanziana in this conversation. Gordon already mentioned a couple of important pieces of legislation: the AI Act, the GDPR, and Sanziana. I mean, you know, the $1 billion euro question is how to regulate AI in healthcare. What kind of framework do we need so we can foster trust and innovation?
Yeah, thank you, Dimitar. And indeed, the $1 billion question. So we think that the use of artificial intelligence in healthcare must be adequately regulated to not only facilitate access to these innovative, mind-blowing solutions that Gordon nicely illustrated, but also to ensure safe and ethical use. So in that sense, we definitely welcome the European Union's efforts towards a first worldwide regulatory framework for artificial intelligence. And we think that the global effects and implications of it will be significant. So the AI Act intends to support providers, manage the risks, and really unlock all these benefits of using AI in healthcare. But it's very broad, it's horizontal, and healthcare has some particular characteristics which need to be considered when defining, developing, and also applying the AI Act in the future. So I'll give you an example. The risk-benefit balance is a key concept in healthcare, and it means weighing and comparing the potential positive outcomes, the benefits of a medical treatment or of a procedure against the potential harms or negative consequences, which are the risks that it entails. And in healthcare, this risk is never reduced to zero. We always strive to reach the best benefit-risk balance. And this concept is not considered in the original version and proposal of the AI Act. And this is just one example of the specific characteristic of this complex and delicate field of healthcare that must be considered.
And Sanziana, talking about the AI Act, how do you see the way forward for this specific legislation? You already mentioned this, and also it's good to reiterate that, for example, there is this bio regulation, the medical device regulation. How does it interplay with the AI Act, and is it too complicated for us to comprehend it? How will this framework fit with all the rest relevant pieces of legislation in this field?
Let me try to give you a simplified flavor of it. So in essence, the Artificial Intelligence Act is horizontal, and it covers any artificial intelligence system in the EU, and including healthcare and medical technology. And so in that sense, the AI Act will determine if and how medical technology will be placed on the market and reach patients. And it joins a very robust existing regulatory framework already, which addresses existing risks today. So for example, today, we have software as a medical device, such as the kind of software that provides medical information for diagnosis, for treatment. And this is already regulated under the so-called medical devices regulation. And this imposes a certain number of responsibilities and requirements, such as being evaluated by a notified body, which really looks into the risks and the benefit that it brings. It mandates quality system for this software and the relevant documentation, and also surveillance once it is on the market. So today, this is regulated, and we are already doing this as providers for such solutions. And so the AI Act will come, and it will play a critical role in combination with the existing legislations. Gordon already mentioned the general data protection, and I am adding the medical devices regulation here, because under the AI Act, all medical technologies are considered high risk. The AI Act has 4 risk classes of uses for the AI system based on the risk it poses to users, and considers all medical technologies in the high risk class. And so it mandates a number of requirements, which are very similar with the requirements imposed by the medical devices regulation, which means that in the future, any medical device which we bring on the market using an AI system will be subject to both requirements of the medical devices regulation and of the AI Act. And why is this of concern to us? Because some of the requirements, which I have shared as an examples, are very similar and at times duplicative between the AI Act and the medical devices regulation. And some of the definitions are potentially conflicting, and this can lead to hurdles and to a very complex and difficult to navigate regulatory environment. So in order for the AI Act to reach its scope, we need a clear framework, legislative framework, which encourages innovative medical technologies to be brought on the market, and which takes into consideration the already existing requirements by the EU MDR. And as long as these exist and are addressed in sectorial legislation, such as our medical technologies regulation, the AI Act should take this into account and consider them as fulfilled by providers and developers of these solutions. And the AI Act can certainly work nicely and smoothly alongside existing regulation and ensure the safe and efficient use we all need.
Yeah, that was my final thoughts to you, Sanziana. I mean, everybody expects legal certainty, transparency, and many other keywords when I talk about the AI Act. But maybe as concluding thoughts from your side, what are the most important keywords? What are the most important angles that you want to see from your sector, from your company, the company you represent? How do you think, briefly, as a general direction, how can the AI Act encourage and foster innovation?
AI Act can certainly encourage and facilitate, again, the access of patients to innovative AI systems. And this can be best assured through a clear regulatory framework, clearly aligned and taking into account existing sectorial legislation, such as the EU Medical Devices Regulation for our medical technology sector, which takes already into account existing requirements, which we already fulfill, and the risk we are already addressing and managing and reducing, and considers these aspects as fulfilled under the EU AI Act.
Fantastic. Angel, I want to also add you into this conversation because it touches upon more or less your everyday activities. And here I want to buzz you in and talk a bit about ethics, maybe. If you remember, and maybe if our listeners remember, all of the efforts on artificial intelligence started with the word ethics, and this was considered by different international institutions. But curious to me is, what are the key ethical considerations of AI in healthcare? Because here we're treading on very, very, sensitive grounds, right?
Yeah, no, totally, Dimitar. And thank you very much for the invitation today to basically share something that I would say every one of us, and I would say every of the persons really listening to this podcast today will be expecting healthcare, right? When you go into the healthcare system and you're going to be treated, or any of your relatives is going to be treated, you expect certain, I would say, standards, right, on the way you're going to be treated. And they are actually the backbone of healthcare. Maybe people don't know the acronyms, but they do really exist, and everyone involved in the healthcare, in the healthcare delivery and the healthcare ecosystem will abide by those principles, which is, some of them are really, I would say, intuitive, like the healthcare should actually deliver good, right? We should benefit from that. It should not deliver harm. So that's the non-maleficence principle. But they also has another two very interesting principles, which are called autonomy and justice. One is more about giving power to people, to empower patients, each of us as a patient, to be more in control of our own health and well-being, but also justice, that we don't discriminate any part of society in getting access to that care. Now, those are four general principles in bioethics that, as I said, are very much ingrained, and they are really the backbone of delivering trust in healthcare. Now, AI, as you can imagine, based on the conversation and some of the elements that both Sanziana and Gordon were explaining, brings, I would say, new connotations, new ways of looking at these ethical challenges. We certainly see, particularly from the work that has been done by the European Union, but also the OECD and UNESCO, that areas which really require a lot of attention when it comes to AI and the ethical development and use of AI is the fact of needing to avoid discrimination, avoiding bias that actually lead to echo chambers, where we actually don't grant equal treatment and access to patients. So that's a key issue there. Another important element is what's really the oversight that humans will have on these systems, right? Because there is a fundamental relationship of trust between the doctor and the patient. How that AI system is helping or not that relationship of trust. And we certainly believe there is huge potential actually in empowering doctors and patients in that relationship. We need to be mindful that there might be also unintended consequences when we put an AI system into play. So therefore, all these are really key considerations that right now I would say not only the industry, but certainly governments and healthcare providers are thinking of. And in that respect, one element which is essential, and I think it's also very much ingrained in what Gordon was explaining, is we need to have a very holistic approach, not only to any healthcare technology, but I would say particularly with AI. Why? Because we right now have a technology which comes with a lot of promise, but also important questions, and it actually has accountability across a very long value chain. What I mean is that there are many stakeholders that maybe were not typically included in the healthcare industry, that we're going to have a very important role, a very big impact in the way actually healthcare is delivered, because there will be AI developers, there will be AI deployers, there will be AI users, and there will be those who will benefit from the final outcomes of AI. So it's a very long value chain where you could also obviously those who regulate and have the oversight of that. So we believe that collaboration across that entire value chain is critical. In the end, is what we typically call that collaboration in healthcare is a team sport. So we think on AI is no less. Actually, we need even more of that.
Absolutely. And maybe on a final note, let's not get stuck in the on the Brussels conversation, Brussels side of the conversation. Maybe, Angel, we can zoom out a bit, and maybe we can elaborate a bit more on what's the international dimensions of artificial intelligence and AI regulation in the months and years to come.
No, that's a great question, Dimitar, because I think the reality is that I would say there are no barriers to internet to date, and I would say even to AI, right? Many of these AI systems are not necessarily coming from the EU. They get used and they get maybe further developed and applied in the EU, but they are coming also from other regions in the world. Therefore, that international collaboration is critical. When it comes to healthcare also, research, development, innovation is an international activity. And actually that international collaboration is extremely important. Therefore, we believe that actually finding common grounds, common understanding between all the key regions in the world is going to be essential to foster innovation, to foster a better understanding, but also a better and safer use of AI technology. Now, the OECD started this work already years ago, putting a framework with principles on key considerations on AI, very much similar to what I was explaining before around ethics. But they were also building, I would say, frameworks for governments that belong to the OECD or not, beyond the OECD as well, where they could actually put policies that will foster a sustainable use of AI. And that includes elements which are really critical, such as skills, capabilities, computing power. But I would say, more importantly, how do we regulate AI? How do we address AI? And this is really critical because, as I said, collaboration on AI needs to happen internationally. But if we find, I would say, fragmented and heterogeneous regulatory frameworks around the world, that collaboration may be actually hindered. It might be really difficult for people to collaborate across regions. So therefore, we believe it's really extremely important that actually governments have more conversations, more dialogue, and more cooperation to bring interoperability of regulation. So what I mean really is that one regulation can speak to another, and therefore, I would say practitioners, users, tech companies, health tech companies, but also healthcare providers can collaborate across borders, no? Because certainly I would say the promise that AI has in healthcare really is calling on us all to really work harder and try to look beyond any boundaries. So for me, that collaboration, and as I said, not only at the OECD, but between the EU, the US, I would also say we need to think of Japan, we need to think of China. I think there are big considerations, and that international collaboration is going to be critical for the sustainable future in AI.
All right, that's a great takeaway in the end. Interoperability of regulation, and hopefully the EU having a central role in this conversation and this future efforts. Angel, Sanziana, Gordon, thank you so much for this conversation. In the weeks before the AI Act is finally closed. Dear friends, thanks for joining Brussels Bytes. We are less than a year from the European Parliament elections, so exciting times ahead. And stay tuned to Brussels Bytes.
That was today's episode of Brussels Bytes. Follow us on SoundCloud for more.